Our special ones.
All right.
It was my author, Jay Moore.
I can already tell this is going to be a feisty group.
It's about a year ago. It's fun. And we have our youngest group. Hi.
Hey guys, how are you? Hi. How are you doing? Thank you very, very, very much for coming. We are very appreciative of your time. It has been such a pleasure and an honor to be here in Pinehurst, where the community is so engaged, where people care so much about the community and about the library. So we can't thank you enough for your time. I see a lot of faces that we saw yesterday, and so the fact that you would give even more of your time is pretty special and pretty amazing. So thank you. My name is Debbie Joy. I work with a company called Library IQ. We are a consultancy that we help libraries with assessment, we help with strategic planning, we help with facilities, we help with staffing, we do all kinds of consulting for public libraries. And then another part of our business operates public libraries. So we operate about 84 libraries all over the United States. So what we, and my colleague Sarah and I, we don't just work on the consulting side, we work on the library side. So we kind of take all of that jazz that we do in library and we apply it to consulting. So I will let Sarah introduce herself.
Good morning. So I get to work on a lot of these projects, but as Debbie mentioned, we operate 84 libraries, and my actual title is the Director of Operations for those library systems. So I get to help a lot with the projects in libraries, kind of enhancing what they're doing, writing grants, a lot of strategic planning for our internal libraries. So we kind of eat, sleep, and breathe libraries. We love them and the service that they can provide. So I'm just excited to be here. This has been a great community input, more than I've ever seen. So cheers to you.
Cheers to you. So as you probably know, and just in case you don't, it's important to frame the conversation that the village and council and community has been thinking about library for a while. Library's been on our minds for a while. There was a library working group that was convened about a year ago. They did a ton of work and worked very hard to understand the landscape. And so now we are here. The sole purpose of our visit this week is to listen and understand and uncover what this community wants and needs for library services. So that's all we're here for, is to listen and learn. We have done 4 sessions just like today, and these sessions are composed of people from all walks of life in Pinehurst, different occupations, ages, you name it. We've done 2 public input meetings, and we had really good attendance at both of those. We're doing an online survey that is open until the end of February. So if you, friends, family, countrymen, whoever, haven't had a chance to take it, it's at engage.vopnc.org/library. So please go online and take that survey. And then finally, once we kind of synthesize all of this data and all of this input, we'll draft some recommendations, and then we're going to test those doing another mailed survey to about 400 people in the community. So this is, like Sarah was saying, one of the most, if not the most comprehensive public engagement programs that we've ever done. So we're really glad that you're here today. We're recording audio just so we don't we don't have to take notes quite as intently, and that way we can focus more on the conversation. So let's go around the room. Please feel free to just introduce yourself. If there's anything that you want to say about connection to the library. I know a couple that met on the steps of the library in Baltimore, which is kind of a cool story. So if you met your partner or spouse at the library, we'd like to know that. And otherwise, let's just go around the room and say hi.
My name is Caitlin Hunsaker. We've lived here for about 6 years now. I have 3 young children, and they just really like the libraries. We used to go to a library in Pennsylvania. We've been to libraries in Maryland. We're a military family, move around. But we've gone to every library in this area that you could possibly go to. So I did not meet my husband in a library. You did?
Then forget it.
He's not. We're working with the next generation.
Gene skips a generation.
Yeah. Hi.
I'm Hugh Tudor Foley. I'm a retired Episcopal priest, and my phone is ringing. I've been going to libraries since I was about 5, different places. So I have spent a lot of hours of my life in libraries, and that's important. We moved here just over about a year and a half ago, and one thing that I hope I can bring to this is at that time, we didn't even know there was a library. Among all that was told to us and shared with us, found the pub okay. But to say, how is the library communicating is sort of where I'm going to come from today.
Interesting. Thank you.
I'm Barbara Pippo, and I'm a retired communications director from Ohio, and I've been here in Pinehurst for 21 years. My beginning for library has always been part of who I am, but also coming and being part of the village of Pinehurst, the library has been part of who I am. And so I visit the library frequently. I volunteer at the book club, and I also do the reading for children, and have discovered just within all of that the importance of the library and the bookshop to all ages.
Good morning. Come on in.
Good morning. Welcome.
Hello. Hello.
Come on in.
Come on in,
Tell
guys.
me what
Absolutely.
Come on in.
So we can scooch even more and make more space. And while we're scooching, let's keep going
It's different.
as best as we can. So hi, how are you?
Good morning. My name is Nick Christopher. You can again tell I'm from New York, and yes, I have an attitude.
Wait, what are you from? Are you from Manhattan, Brooklyn, Staten Island?
I think I'm the only one born in Manhattan.
Born in Manhattan. Okay. All right.
Been here about 7 years, courtesy of Uncle Sam. Retired about a year ago. Was deputy director of facilities for all the Army Reserve facilities across the country. I'm very much into libraries. In New York, we could walk down the block and go to a library, and you can find everything there, from a novel to, at that time, dating myself, Uncle Wangel's encyclopedia on the shelf. And you had to know the Dewey Decimal System. But I think we moved on from that, and I look at libraries as more than just repositories of books. It is grown. And many people have the attitude, well, why do we need libraries? We have our laptops and our iPhones, and I can look up anything I want. But that's not what just a library is.
What do you think a library is?
It's a center of the community if done properly. It brings kids together and teaches them how to socialize. It teaches them how to utilize a laptop, how to gather information. I think today the most important thing that you can do for your children is teach them how to get information on something they do not know.
That's, thank you, that's great. Yeah, sorry, your name is, sir? What's your name?
Nick Christopher.
Nick, thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Kay Pearson. We came here about 12 years ago, drawn by the New England Village. We're from Maine and Vermont. And I'm a retired nurse. My first job probably was at my village library in Vermont. I was probably 10 and shelving books in the children's section. I hope to see, I would hope that, even though, and I'm here as the representative who doesn't use the library, although Audrey knows me because I probably zip into the Tufts archives. I'm a golfer and Donald Ross aficionado. But I feel it's important that our young people right up through the retirement age have a place to go, like this gentleman was saying. I feel it is the heartbeat of the community.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Laidlaw, and I started living here permanently in 2017. I've come from the Chicago area where we have a very robust system of absolute collaboration between hundreds of libraries. So we can get what we're looking for or get books or information from a lot of different points. But that also means we have extremely talented librarians whose real role is to help us find the information we're looking for. And honestly, my biggest disappointment here has been we really don't have a robust option. If you're interested in a subject that you'd like to learn about, it's quite hard to assemble basic data to find someone who might be better than you are at searching the internet, at getting publications sent to you. And I hope that we can move in that direction, because I think a library should be more than a reading room with a repository of old novels and mysteries.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sorry, that sounds really sour, but
We are here to share both the sweet and the sour, but I just want to amplify one thing that we heard already, which is, and this is something that we do in libraries. So, I always joke, well, I saw it on the internet, so clearly it's true. So in library, we sort of think about our role as supporting children, teens, and adults, everybody, with understanding how to discern reliable from unreliable information on the internet. We consider that to be a library job, so to speak. So thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Sorry I'm late, but what was the main question that?
Well, it's a very important test, and 1 trillion divided by 17. We were just like introducing ourselves and just say if you have any connection to the library or just sort of library generally.
Okay, my name is Katia Weaver. We moved here 4+ years ago, and we come from big cities like Atlanta and Louisville and all these places, and moving here in the village was a big change. But one of the things that my daughter and I were kind of like disappointed is, despite of having this small little vibrant community, we had the library that you just mentioned, and so we have been to all the libraries around the area, Moore County, Sour Pines, St. Hills Community College, and we miss that big place where kids can just study, not only just get books, but sometimes kids have interests, they want a quiet place away from home that they can study and prepare. There's a lot of sport opportunities here, but we also have a big number of kids that are into academics and intellectual studies that it would be nice to have a place where they can just gather and discuss. There are debate clubs, there's book clubs that they are missing, and we have a lot of kids from elementaries, we have middle and high school, and I just think that Pinehurst should have a nice bigger study space besides just having books and computers available.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure.
I'm Ron Rohde. I am retired. I do some writing, and I read a lot. I've spent most of my career working with words and ideas. I grew up, my dad was a newspaper editor. I grew up newspapering and then moved from newspapering into corporate public relations and spent most of my career in public relations, where we deal with words and ideas and trying to inform people and motivate them to make right decisions, mostly in San Francisco and New York. Then,
Who'd you work for?
sorry?
What companies did you work
For Kaiser Aluminum, and then subsequently, after that, ran the public relations program for Bank of America, when it was a San Francisco company. We moved from San Francisco here about 12 years ago. You're right, it is sort of a cultural shock when you move in. But the point I wanted to make about libraries was, my mom was a Southern Baptist, so I went to church. My dad wasn't. She took me to church from day one. He took me to the library from the time I could read. And all at once I discovered that there was a world. And I can't think of any institution in any community more important than the library. So I'm very interested to see what happens here for you.
If we need, by the way, we probably have several volunteer baby holders, but I just want to say I was a volunteer. Well, what a doll.
My name is Kristen Bradley. This is Alice. I also have a 3 and a 6-year-old. Also a military family. I've been here for about 9 years. We also have used all the libraries in the area. We probably use Pinehurst the least, which is unfortunate, and I hope that that can change. And that's why I'm here, because I agree that I think the library is a really important community resource, and it can provide a lot of important community services and bring the community together. And I just hope that we can build that. And honestly, we might not even be here. We probably won't, knowing the pace Pinehurst moves at, by the time like a new library comes to fruition. But I figure when we leave, a family probably just like us will move in. So I'm here to kind of speak for them as well.
Thank you.
Nice.
My name is Nancy Geddes. I feel like a native. I've been here for 25 years and love the library. I served on the executive board of the library for, I don't know, Audrey, how long? A long time. I was on the Friends board before that, and we started the bookshop. And one of the phrases that I will never forget is one of the gentlemen on our committee said, "If you open a bookshop, I'm out of here." Well, the next thing you know, he said, he was there every day, the whole time. He and his wife, Bob and Barbara Lee, if you happen to have known either of them, what wonderful people. Anyway, when we moved into the bookshop over in Olmsted, I think it was probably 13 or 14 years ago, he said, "What are we going to do if we run out of books?" This tells you what a literary community we have in Pinehurst, because within 2 years we had to open the annex a couple of doors down. And subsequent to all of that, we now have the Given Bookshop in the heart of the village, which is a wonderful gathering place, and it's a wonderful, just a wonderful place to go. And if you don't buy books, sit and talk with your friends. It's a very, very busy, wonderful place. I've seen a lot of changes here. When we first moved here, if a car pulled up next to you at a stoplight, it was a traffic jam. Things have changed tremendously, and the library has grown with that as well. I know there's still a lot of room for more growth and better programs, but they have really done an outstanding job, and I praise Audrey and her staff.
Thank you.
I'm Emily Santuato. I'm born and raised in North Carolina, but I married a Yankee and moved to New Jersey. And when I was in school in North Carolina, as soon as I was able to ride my bike, I went to the library and filled up my basket with books. And I told the librarian I would read every book in the library before I graduated from high school. I got to the G's. That was it. But at any rate, after we got married, we lived in Raleigh. And then my husband got Jerseyitis and took me to New Jersey. He said, "Come with a smile on your face and I'll bring you back in 20 years.
And did he?
He died.
Oh.
It was 45 years. My son came to North Carolina State as my husband and I did. We brought him down from New Jersey. We came to Pinehurst to play golf on our way back to New Jersey. And he was in business up there. So when he finally decided to retire, he said, we're moving back to Pinehurst. So we bought a condo in 2001, the day after my son got married. And then he came down full-time in 2013. And I went back and forth. And while I was here, I found the Gibbons Bookshop over in Olmsted. And I volunteered there, and I've been there ever since as a volunteer. But as most of us have, I have cards from every library, Moore County, the college, Pinehurst, Southern Pines, and Aberdeen. And I have to pay to join Southern Pines library by the year, but I need books all the time. I take 4 home every Monday, and next Monday I get 4 more. And
Have you
so-
made it past the G's yet? Did you make it past the G's in any of these libraries?
No, not but we just need more space and more room for more books. And this library is lovely, but it's wonderful as a museum, but lacking as a library. I just want more, bigger and better for everybody.
Thank you. Well, we're glad you're home in North Carolina.
I'm happy to be back in North Carolina.
I'm Jack Farrell. I guess you say Pinehurst has been my hometown for off and on for 60 years, even before there was a Gibbon library. And I've seen the library and the village grow over the years, the village more than the library, to tell you the truth. In college, actually, I worked part-time as a librarian in the local library, and so I'm really familiar with being a proctor and checking out books and keeping people quiet. Those were the days. I've been volunteering at the Tufts Archive for about 10 years, since I went back down after retiring. And so I'm familiar with the library operations to an extent because I can see it from where I sit. And I've talked to probably thousands of people coming into the archives that either have been library users or archive users over the years, so I have a reasonable understanding of what's going on there. I hope that, Debbie, I think you expressed it well, that you're going to discover the wants and needs of the community, and I think that's important. I think we need to, it'll be interesting to see how it evolves. So I'm open-minded one way or another. We'll see how it plays out. Thank you.
I'm Jerry Board. I've never lived anywhere but North Carolina. I'm a probably only native Eastern North Carolina person here, and I lost my name.
Now everything's
Blame it on the Macarena. I'm a retired university administrator in marketing and development. The first place I went when I moved to Pinehurst, and I've been coming here most of my life, was to the library, or the things I need for the work I do in my retirement. I am interested in what people want and what people need, but I have great concerns about the resources in providing what people want and need and how that is going to work. I hope the new library will not be a private library, because I do not think that we can sustain in perpetuity another private library. That has been a big problem for the history of this wonderful library, but I think those...
I encountered the archives and the Gibbons pretty quickly. I consider nonfiction an important restitution for my poor performance as a student in grade school and high school. So I go in, there's a shelf of new nonfiction, and I just harvest stuff. And that to me is the great purpose of a library. You get something that's buzzing around in your head, and you say, oh, that's something I can learn about. I have greatly enjoyed the volunteer staff in the library. It's not that they know everything. They can find everything that's there. But what I'm looking for is something new. And I enjoy the fact that you can go in there and you say, I've seen that there are these 2 books that exist. Are they here? If one of them is, fine. I take it home and read it. If it's not, they'll put it on the list and they'll get it for me eventually. Because the library does participate in some greater world of sharing books.
Okay, thank you.
Honestly, beyond that, in 23 years, I've seen the growth here. I've seen the new families come in. I'm not one of those people who says, we should have shut the door 20 years ago. I like seeing what's happening in the community. And so I'm happy to support it in some way that,
Gotcha.
you know.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Amy Cordero. We have been here, the military brought us here about 7 years ago. I'm a former attorney, so I went to law school back in the times when you actually pulled the dusty old law book off the shelf, and you sit there and you read. And I grew up in high school. I grew up in a town that was very similar to this. It was an historical village, and we had our little library in town. Later on, the town had to make the decisions that we're making now. How do we expand the library, but keep it closer to the center of town? It has worked out beautifully. It's Hudson, Ohio. And I thought that, I'm like, it sounds familiar. Sorry, also from Hudson. It's now an award-winning library at the center of town, and it can really be fabulous for a community.
So are you guys saying Hudsonites, like, was your experience that it contributed to the vibrancy or contributed to the community?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Casey Gray. I have 3 children, 10, 8, and 7. We moved here about 4 years ago, but prior to moving here, we lived in Norfolk, Virginia, where my husband built the downtown Norfolk Library.
Wait, what was he was a volunteer?
He was the project manager. He ran the...
So he worked for the construction company?
Yes, and it was very neat to see how they kept the historic building, but then also created a new building and implemented, connecting the two. And so my children, being very young at the time, we were there all the time. They had programs for infants, toddlers, all the way up. It was really great to, teach them about what libraries can be and what they have. And then we moved here, and we knew it was a smaller town, and we were excited for, the change. But one of the first places I took them was the library, and not that we were disappointed, but it was just different, and we didn't have the same programs. And I mean, there was story time. We did, use that every Thursday, and it's where a lot of, they met a lot of their little friends. But I just haven't seen a change in programming since then. So it'd be nice to see a little bit more for them.
Gotcha.
Cool. My name's Sarah Blakely, not the creator of Spanx. Sarah Blakely, sorry. I have 4 kids, 13 down to 7. We've been here for 15 years, also from Illinois. But yeah, we love the library, and we usually are at Pinehurst. Sometimes we use Southern Pines, but the one thing that I kind of hope that we can keep, I love the feel of Pinehurst Library. I love how cozy it is and how you feel relaxed when you go in there. And obviously we definitely need more books, so we need bigger space. We need all of those other things. But if we go to Southern Pines Library, they have a great play space, but right in the middle of all the kids' books are computers. Oh. And guess what? That's all my kids want to do. And we have enough electronics, and we are fighting the electronic battle at home, at school, all the time. And it is a struggle for me, and I want to run them over with my van. I hate them. Even though I love them, and it's important, and it has to be incorporated in the electronics. Taking care of the electronics, occasionally my kids play one. But I kind of want to protect the feel of walking into a library, and physical books are important. And you don't learn as well when you read off a Kindle. You don't retain as much. And it's still important to have those options, and it's still a viable option. But I guess I want my kids to have that feeling that I have when I walk into a library about how exciting this is and how much information is in this space all at your fingertips. So I just want to, I know we need all the other options too, but I just want to make sure there's a safe space that's protected, that our kids are still getting a quiet place to be, because lives are hectic today.
So just to kind of circle on that, and Sarah and I are learning, we're always learning too. So sometimes, you know, even a couple of years ago, we'd go around the country saying like, libraries are a key access point for technology, which they are, and particularly for low income. But Sarah's not the first person from whom we've heard. We also want a place to get our kids away from screens. And so maybe what we're hearing is the Given Library here in Pinehurst has a really cozy, warm feel, and we do not want to lose that.
Yes.
Cozy, homey, warm feel. So I know you guys don't have all day, and we want to be very respectful of your time. So given that we want to make sure we hear lots of different things, would it be reasonable to frame this discussion? Would it be reasonable to say Pinehurst is changing and the demographics are changing? Is that something that the group sort of agrees on?
Yes.
Sure.
The library is currently has a private funding structure, and that is, we've talked about that in other sessions. It's very, very unusual, and it is not really a sustainable model, and we're already seeing that here in Pinehurst. So why don't we just throw it off by saying, does this group want a library that is not privately funded here in Pinehurst? Does this group want a library in Pinehurst?
Yes.
Yes. Good. So sounds like yes. Did anybody disagree?
I just feel that the community has benefited from trying to support the library. And so it's a scale issue.
Yeah, I hear you. So maybe what Bob is saying is we could privately fund a library, and we did for a long time to here, but as we want to scale, private funding is perhaps not.
I don't feel that there's enough support now. Obviously, there's not enough private support now, and there's not another, give and trust.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure I understand how the funding issue relates to the wants and needs for services.
I think we
the
need
focus
to.
should be on what the community would want, and then of course what would really be needed, and then of course the affordability issue will obviously play into the
So why don't we start with that, Jack? Why don't you tell us, what do you want? What do you think Pinehurst should have in a library, if anything?
Well, I thought the session the other day, I don't know how many people went to, where there was 18 different services on the boards. I thought those were pretty well done. I don't know how it played out as far as votes go. But I think there was a broad range of services, some of which appeal to those who only go in and rent, or, borrow a nonfiction and so forth, and those that want, a makerspace. I mean, that's kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. I think somewhere in between, there's a lot of services that appeal to younger families, and I think they should be there. Youth programs, children's programs, teen programs. I think there's a lot of services that appeal to the older generation, if I can characterize myself, that want to go to small-scale cultural events, that want to go to learning things maybe. Gathering a given approach, which was been used over the number of years, has been reasonably successful. So I think those two type of activities are important, and I think they should be included. So I think that out of those 18, you're going to boil it down to maybe a half a dozen key services that are appropriate for both the younger demographic and the older demographic in the community. I also think embedded in there was some interesting concepts which I see a demand for, which is space for people to meet. I tell you, there's any number of book clubs and or organizations that I belong to, in other words, that are saying, where can we meet? Can we get a conference room at the Pinehurst Country Club or at the bookstore in the back, upstairs or wherever, and they'd like to get together. Those meeting spaces, I think, are important. The other area which might be important is, we talked about the work at home. Well, work at home is fine, but you also from time to time need a collaborative spaces where people can get together and use the technology to communicate, whether it be FaceTime or Skype or even some newer technology, to communicate with other parts of your organization. I think if the library can provide that, that's a gathering space that would be particularly useful. So I probably went on, probably far too much, but those are the broad range of services that I see that we'll discover, and prioritizing them will be the goal of the community.
And I want to make sure we try to do some of that today, so go ahead.
Are there any libraries that have both, that have private funding as well as the town or village or city?
So what we have seen, what we've seen the most is generally a library's facility, its collection, its operation, and most of its programs are going to be funded municipally. And then libraries, some libraries, not all, but some have a development effort or a fundraising effort that pays for special things like, I used to work in fundraising, so I used to try to get money for robotics kits, or especially programs that are for more than just one day. So if we want to do a 6-week, really cool robotics program for 6th and 7th graders, I might need to go out and try to seek funding for that, or at least I did at that library. Other libraries they don't have to do any fundraising at all. There's resources to do kind of what we think of as more special programs. Some authors can be expensive. Go ahead.
We talked a lot about not only wants and needs, but the library being central to the community. And it seems to me that the Friends of the Library, whatever that group happens to be, helps put the library more in the center than some kind of funding that came from wherever.
So Hugh is
Raleigh
saying,
or whatever.
don't forget the Friends of the Library for funding. But
As a communications tool, sure, plus some funds.
Sure. So let's think about for a second, Jerry, I've got you. Let's think about, okay, if we wanted to find a half a dozen library services, and we talked about some while we were going around the room. If we want to identify half a dozen library services that we think are important in Pinehurst, what do you guys think they should be?
So I think children's services are a big thing, and it's right now they have the story time. I think they're doing like a musical story time. When we first moved here, there was one story time a week, and the problem is that it's at 10 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. So if you say you want to bring your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old, well, they're in preschool then, so that really doesn't work. So, but there's no other option. And the other activity is they have a Saturday morning once a month. So that's really, unless I'm wrong, unless something has changed, that's the extent of the children's programs. And we came from, we would go to this library in Pennsylvania, and the librarian was very dynamic, and she would do the stories, and she'd do all the voices, and she'd take the kids on a book train where she'd lead them all around and say, what are you interested in? She'd grab them like 10 books. What are you interested in? Grab them like 10 books, and the kids were so excited to go on the book train. Then we came to this library, and we did do the story time a couple times, and all the readers were all volunteers, which is so kind of them to take the time out of their day to do it, but they don't have as much of that dynamic personality. They don't have the librarian's skill set of, like, let me find out what you're interested in, drag you to these books, and you really need this book, because they know what's in the library, and they're like, you're interested in planets, let me find it. And the way the library and the children's section is set up, it's like, it's very small, so the shelves the books are stacked in there, you can't see them. They're like stacked in there, and like all you can see is the spine, so like you spend forever like going through trying to find something that the kids will be interested in. And they play there, but then the reading room is right here, so the librarians are constantly shushing you, and the kids are just like,
Gotcha.
But they have a wonderful summer camp. My daughter loved the summer camp. It was wonderful. I wish it would be also for younger kids because only she was 6 at the time. She was the only one old enough to do it. The other ones were like desperately jealous. So I hope that the summer camp is happening again this year because they loved it so much. But I would love to see more like that. And then as the kids get older, they don't have activities. I would love to see Lego building clubs or robotics, or because the elementary schools don't even really have. They have a robotics club in Pinehurst, but I think you have to be in 3rd grade to be able to do it. And this is like a whole area that I would love my kids to be exposed to, and there just isn't.
Gotcha.
There isn't anything. I'm an engineer, so I'm like, let's build things. Yes.
Gotcha.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so
second all of that.
So children's programs, robust, emergent literacy, STEM. What other kinds of programs?
Could I
don't wanna forget
mention
Jay.
a follow-up? I mentioned this, I think, yesterday. But for working parents, single parents, just having 10 o'clock or 10:30 on Thursday morning isn't enough. That even if it's a couple, both parents work, the child is in daycare, whatever.
Yeah.
But to provide the opportunity for that part of the demographic, if we're going to be inclusive with the library, following up on what you said, with all the programs, there needs to be a way to be available to the whole community.
Gotcha. Jerry, what did you want to say?
I was just going to say something about, do all of the components of the library need to be under one roof? Do the library hours always need to be the same every day? Do we need a children's library and a children's librarian? Could we add an annex to the community center that might become a lab? Do we need a research area that might not be? Does everything have to be? I think if we continue to think of a traditional library in the way most of us are used to a library, then Alice, who's going to be 15 years old before we can snap our fingers, is not going to have what she and her cohort are going to need in a place where we're looking for virtual reality, open access, and all of the changes that are coming at us faster than a train. So we do have the opportunity here in this town in some places that we might even use existing buildings.
I like your idea about the community building.
It doesn't mean we let go of some kind of central location, but I'm not sure that a shining beacon on the hill in Pinehurst is going to serve that cadre of the people who serve us in the restaurants here in this town, or who work in these hotels, and their families, or the military families, the larger issues. We just think we're building 5 new schools.
What you're saying about the community center, they actually, one of the things they've been building with the community center is meeting space.
Yes.
So we would want to make sure, if we're saying we need meeting space in the library, let's evaluate the brand new community center that was just built and whether it's actually going to meet that need.
And they're already doing some of the make it kinds of things that Jack mentioned, that maybe that's another component of that. It's just thinking about how things might be.
That's only with the building, okay, look at the programs that are being offered at the community center, at the community college. I think we have to partner with other organizations in the area and collaborate with them.
Well, Jerry brings up the good point, which is we're identifying the services, and then I would look for the community and the consultant to articulate what is the best way to deliver those services. Some of them might be from a central location, other might be use the other resources we have in the community already.
And that's important, not only from a programming aspect, but also from a financial aspect.
How those can be
Let
delivered.
me relate something to you. I was getting my hair cut the other day by a local, and who's been around for a while. He says, why do we need another library? We can look up anything we want on the internet. It's just a waste of money.
Well, that's a narrow view of services.
That's a narrow view, but the idea is if you can get these people to understand that it's just not one building.
Exactly.
I
Okay.
hear what you're
community.
saying about, I think sometimes good is better than perfect, right? Like if we wait for like the perfect giant library, maybe it's never gonna happen with everything under one roof. But I do think there's a nuance there, another side to that, that if we parcel things out too much, we lose that community aspect that I think a lot of us were talking about and looking for. Though, I mean, certainly we probably don't need more meeting space, for example, because we have that new community center. But I think they're both important, and finding that balance is going to be really important.
Okay, so I want to drill down on that for just a second. Let's talk about this single idea of central-ish library plus either library services offered in existing structures like the community center if there's space, or others, or building another, satellite library service access point. What does this group think of that? Do we want it kind of consolidated in one place, or do we want it dispersed? What do we think?
I think that one of the difficulties we'll always come up against in Pinehurst is our historic designation. So we really I don't believe, I may be wrong, and Jack would probably be able to address this better. I don't believe there are a lot of open spaces that could have the square footage that a completely central library would need, as well as enough parking space for people. I think that's always going to be an issue. And I guess I would see, for example, I think the Tufts Archive is super. That space could become an absolutely world-class area that concentrates on that brings people who want to research that right there, and it becomes very important without burdening that space with the whole cohort of library users trying to use it.
Okay, so
And then, I beg your pardon if I could go on. And then we could utilize areas in the central downtown that, again, have specialties or special emphasis, I think. I just think that, and work very hard to collaborate with the community college that has a pretty good library starting, with Southern Pines, which has a pretty good library starting. I'm coming from an environment where part of your property taxes was a library tax. I would expect that. And in Hinsdale, Illinois, it was about 12% of your property taxes. Now that may sound outrageous, but you were saying, gosh, if you use the Southern Pines Library, it's $60 a year.
It varies with how much
They're
they need.
paying it. They're paying that, the Southern Pines people are paying that
That's on their
through
property.
their property taxes. And the Chicago Tribune just did an article about the most important cultural entities within cities, and relative to the percentage of use, it's not movie theaters, it's not live theaters, it's not shopping malls, it's libraries. And they also went through, I thought, some very interesting research saying all of our younger friends who've grown up in the digital age, they have their phones, they have their iPads, are some of the heaviest users of libraries. And Sarah, I liked what you said about let's get our kids away from screens. The way the Hinsdale, Illinois Library addressed that was there was a bank of computers with a librarian if you needed to do something as a group. But then there were computers, single computers, spread throughout study areas. So, sure, a kid who wasn't supervised could go and play games.
Right.
But that's not really, the purpose of the library isn't to babysit, but the point is to break that up so it doesn't become a group. But that's just an aside, I'm sorry. I just want to say that.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what I can't read your name, Tab.
I'm Lisa Laidlaw.
Lisa. So Lisa had a couple ideas in there, so let's test the first one. The first one mentions the archives. So we know we have the archives in the library presently in one building. So let's test the idea of moving one of those two things out of the current building. So I think what Lisa was saying
Because
is,
that building can't be altered and stay within the historical.
I wouldn't go there.
We don't even want to go there.
so it is, that
building
is, to
as it
Bill's good
stands.
point, we have learned
As
that,
it stands.
yeah, we've learned that
That's what I'm
that is very complex and a bit of a rabbit hole. But the idea, so let's say, Lisa, what if we take the library services, library collection out of that building and now it becomes archive only? How do we feel about that idea?
I think that's a good idea. I mean, right now the elementary school does field trips. They do walking field trips into the village, and one of the things they do is they visit the Tufts archives, and they get to learn about the history of the area, which they wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. I mean, I went on the field trip, and that was how I got exposed to it. And then I told my husband about it. He was like, "Oh, I love that place." I'm like, "Oh, we don't golf." So we know nothing about it, but it's like, he like goes and hangs out there, and I was like, I had no idea you were doing that.
I mean, that is the center of the town, of the village.
Yeah.
And that is the center of the golf industry for this area. What more better than having the Tufts archives be the draw for a museum and for research on golf?
What it could
Is that really a significant draw now? You know, how many people come in and use library services in that building now? How many people come in and use museum services? I don't know the answer to that, but I imagine.
Audrey does.
Audrey does.
Can I throw something out? I was just looking at stats for I'm working on lots of different other projects right now, like annual reports and stuff. And in 2018, we had guests from 44 states and 13 countries. This year, we've had guests, or 2019, we've had guests from 47 states and 8 countries. And it's not just Scotland now. We have Australia, we have the Netherlands, we have Belgium, and we have Korea. I mean, people know about this place for the golf, but it also is the history of Pinehurst. And as I think, I forgot your name, but you said the kids
Me,
go to.
Caitlin.
Caitlin, yeah, sorry. The children always come and learn about the history, and they have great questions. We do like a history fact hunt, big history fact hunt, and they have little papers that they fill out stuff. But I mean, people from all over come to that museum, and I just want to throw that out. I think we had like 4,300 guests in 2018. I haven't figured out 2019 yet. Which is, I mean, that's a lot of people for a little place that everybody thinks nobody knows about.
Right.
So is it
You
fair?
gotta realize that if you're gonna have a place that's for research, for a specific venue, you're not gonna get the same traffic that you're gonna have coming in to take out a book, a nonfiction or fiction. It's gonna be a different level of traffic, and we should understand that.
Chrissy has an idea for that.
Oh gosh, well, we were just talking amongst ourselves when we shouldn't have been. But what if we kept the Tufts there, moved the Village Welcome Center over into the building as well, and then perhaps either kept the adult books there and then maybe built onto or added somewhere else a children's library to the community center or another building somewhere. Not that we want to create that divide, but like if we were taking the kids to play basketball and then they want to go, you know, over here and grab some books on our way out or whatever.
So would you rather, let's test that idea, but let's test it in 2 parts. So one is to keep the archives in the current location and put the Welcome Center there. Let's test that part. What does this group think about that? That's great.
Makes sense.
That'd be great.
Okay, so we feel, sounds like we have some consensus there. Let's test the idea of library services in some collection at the community center, and then I want to even take it more detailed. Would we want it just to be a children's library, or would we want a more comprehensive library at the community center? And by the way, if we don't want it at the community center, where would we want it? So I just asked a really complex question.
I don't think that the site at the community center would lend itself to, I mean, they have an expansion space that they've identified, but that was to expand a separate gym on, like an additional gym space. So I don't think that they would be able to, I mean, I live right there, so I don't see where they would put a couple library. like, I mean, not one of any particular size. The location I thought that people were talking about to build a new library was over near the police station. That was,
Okay.
that's what I-
It's all
yeah,
on the table.
well, so I think ideally, if everything would be in one place, like that'd be wonderful. Like
So-
to have the children through adult, because then you have that like young adult period of time where you then like, you know, you're kind of like in the middle. Like, do you move into?
Understood.
So ideally, yes, you want everything in one place.
Okay.
But if you can't have that, for whatever reason.
Gotcha. And then, I'm sorry,
Okay.
this
Okay.
is, okay.
My turn.
It's your turn, finally.
I'm going to throw out a lot of stuff. I love the idea of the Welcome Center at Tufts. I also love the idea, but I'm like Jack, I'm open to whatever meshes in together. I love Tufts Archives. I think that building is perfect for that type of activity, drawing in people from around the world. I work on Pinehurst number 2, of course, and I see people from around the world. And when I get engaged with them, I say, yes, have you, and especially the folks that are the golfers and are super interested in the history. Have you been to Tufts Archives? So here it is. So I send them downtown, and they're roaming around downtown anyways. So here's what came to me a couple months ago when I knew I was gonna, I applied. I really wasn't gonna apply to this, but I'm the one that doesn't use the library, but I want to see it available for the young families and everybody that needs and wants it. When we retired here and go back to Maine and go up and down the coast, we're kind of troubadours, we're gypsies, and I tell you, every town that I stop in, I use the library. So I've been up and down the coast of Maine and no less than 6 libraries. And I use it for different purposes. One of them that comes to mind is Camden, Maine, on the coast. And what they did was they had a historic building, and in the 90s, they built a new underground, opens up to the harbor, and they have a historic amphitheater to the side in a park-like setting. And my husband and I were talking about it this morning. It seems like libraries tend to be, I could be wrong, you know, depending on the situation, in a park-like setting. I'm all about feng shui. Okay? I'm all about feng shui. And the sense of place within that building, within where the building sits. So what came to me was, in a similar situation as Camden, Maine, that if you put the visitor center into Tufts Archives, and don't forget, I was going to say this earlier, you've got the post office, where you have meeting centers and you have those programs, which I absolutely just admire that they made that. What if you were to add on to this building? You've got the park setting outside, you've got the splash pad over there, you've got the community center over there. It's sort of centralized outside of that village center. I don't like to see it go away from the village core because I'm a hanger-oner. I love the way things were, but to open it up and to look forward to what do we need, where, when, and then maybe some of those activities that we do in Tufts Parks, which is kind of burgeoning at the seams at times, could move here to the meadow, etc. I'm getting
So
off
what
of
does this
that.
group think about that idea? So if we have the archives in the current structure, Welcome Center potentially, what would we think about having library here in this, either near Village Hall or across the street, or what, in the vicinity of Village Hall? What is?
I don't see how you can move to how to execute without knowing what are the services we're trying to provide. I mean, those 6 or 8 services can be grouped into compatible groups, whereas a certain facility would be most appropriate for 6 or 8 of them. You know, the meeting space and so forth, the community center and so forth, whereas others might lend themselves to the current facility. So I don't see how you can design the library and talk about where to put it without knowing what are the compatible.
But I think
services.
talking about it is raising those
Seems like we're getting a
questions.
little ahead of ourselves.
No, I think it's raising the questions as to what we want, because I was
Exactly.
bouncing off this, that, not this, but, the young, I love it to hear the young people, and what you need, and I envision perhaps a place that is almost state-of-the-art that addresses all those 6 things
6 wants and needs.
of what we're.
I would love to see it over here. I think this is a great spot, like you just said. Like, we're over here a lot doing things at the park, and someone else mentioned the splash pad, or we just walk the trails over here a lot. And then, I might have missed this a little bit, but sort of just to chime in on the divided or comprehensive, I mean, for our family, it would make the most sense to have everything together as much as possible. All the collections, I think, like Caitlin was saying, and as close to the center as possible. And in a perfect world, we could wave a magic wand and keep everything right where it is, because I love that spot. But yeah, so I think having everything under one roof would be priority for us.
Has anyone talked about, like, the theater building seems to be an underutilized space, and I know it's privately owned. It's privately owned, and they have like a lease, but leases with, there's a new restaurant that went in there and stuff, but it seems like that's a really underutilized space, and it has a really interesting history. Again, first grade field trip, I learned so many things. But
It has a ghost.
It has, yeah, and the man who owns it, like, was telling us all about the history of that building. It's just so interesting, and I just wonder if it would be possible to purchase that building and utilize that as a library space.
Especially without the Welcome Center, because then that...
And then have the Welcome Center move over to
Right,
the archives, and
now
now
you
you
have
still
extra
have
space,
everything in
yeah.
the center of town,
Yeah.
and then, I don't know, you eliminate the problem of that building being like 3/4 empty the majority of the time. Because it's such like a prominent building in the town, and like when you first get here, you're like, ooh, what's that building? And you're like, not much. And you're like, there should be something really great in there, and you want there to be something really great in there, and it has all this wonderful history, and there's not anything really great in there, and I wish there was.
I think you go back to, you've got to decide if you're going to split services
Yeah.
out of the existing building. And that may be a good idea to have certain services in the theater building, such as the children's programs. But how far do you go beyond that? Because you can't have all the programs in the theater building. It's not sufficient.
So let's...
Which goes back to
So
what
we-
Jack is
so-
saying, what do we want to do? And then we can decide where we're going to put it.
So let's build on that in a second. Jerry, what did you want to say?
I want to go back to the Tufts Archives question, and I know this is the elephant in the room for a lot of people, and I guess I'll just throw it out there. What is the role of the Pinehurst Corporation in the building of the new library? And what is their partnership? And what are they willing to do? What is Mr. Dedmon willing to do to get what he wants? If he's interested in an archives in that beautiful building and a museum and the Welcome Center and all of those things, are we going to give that away to the Pinehurst Corporation?
What is the
when there
Pinehurst
are
Corporation? I don't know what you're talking about.
the resort?
Oh,
Everything in this town is what it is. Everything in this town.
Okay.
And everything in this town, including that building you're talking
Yeah.
about, and all the other buildings around that green, are all the Pinehurst Corporation
Oh, I thought that building was
buildings.
privately owned.
It may be now, but initially it
Oh,
was
okay.
not. So everything here, this is a corporate town.
Yeah.
It was built as a corporate town and functioned as a corporate town most of its life. I think that it behooves all the citizens of this town and in this area, when we talk about partnerships, we've got to take this further. I don't think we can think about where things can be or what things are until we know what we have to work with regard to who is going to be in a partnership with us. What is the role of the state of North Carolina in this? There are 2 private libraries in North Carolina, one in Tryon in the mountains, the Lanier Library, and this one. This one is going. It probably won't be private anymore. So where do the funds come from to maintain a huge operation or even satellite operations in perpetuity or the taxes or whatever we're going to do. I personally hope that we do not become a library where someone pays $60 a year. I went to join that library, and when that lady said to me, "You can't join unless you pay $60, all I could think of was the little children whose parents work as waiters and waitresses in this corporate town. Don't forget the word corporate. This is a huge corporation with gobs of money. So if Mr. Debnam and the corporation is interested in that beautiful, wonderful, historical building, the Given Library, to make it into their
Yes, and
museum.
Mr. Desmond has a habit of putting his hands in the pockets of every organization that uses his facility. So it's time for the
So guys, it's reasonable, you know, we want to think about different,
Revenue
we've talked
streams.
about revenue, we've talked about funding structure, and that's important. We're not suggesting that it isn't. And one thing I think we should notice here, let's notice, there's a lot of passion. We have some strong feelings about this. So we're trying to have a process. We're trying to work through a process, and today we're trying to understand what people want and need for library services, and that spreads over. And Kate, I've got you because I just feel like you're.
I'm patient. Go.
I want to hear what you have to say. So if we talk a little bit about what a facility looks like and where a facility would be, that's reasonable. So we can talk about. You know, we talked about different kinds of spaces, that's facility related. We talked about children's services, that's service related. Kate, what do you think? What kinds of services? What about facility? What are you thinking?
Well, I think the question I was going to ask, mostly this lady answered it. I was trying to figure out what the point of the meeting is, because we're talking about services, facility, money, funding, and I don't know. I'm very practical. If we don't have the funding or the means to have a bigger place, conference rooms, et cetera, then to me this is nice sharing time, but we're not going anywhere. And then services, I think at least basic services from any library is necessary. Children's good selection of books, programs, young adults, young adult fiction, non-fiction, study areas, all the stuff is, I think, necessary. Beyond that, I don't know what else we could do, but I think making the kids, even the young kids and the young people in this area or older people in this area to be active volunteers would take a lot of, funding or resources to just give it back to your community. As you can see, there's a lot of passion, there's probably a lot of effort that we can put into it. But I'm really interested in more, how are we gonna afford all this, and if it's feasible, if it's reasonable and realistic to even talk about all these things. But I'm patient, I'm willing to hear what you all are suggesting, which I think it's great that you all have different ideas and different angles from the different interests and backgrounds that you come
But
from.
what she's saying is, until we have a vision of what we want, there's no point in discussing and it's very important, but it is minutia in terms of, what can we afford? We need to know what we want and then take reasonable steps to determine if it's affordable.
Do we have the basic services offers in the current library we have in Pinehurst?
I beg your pardon?
Do we have the basic library services offered in this library?
Don't ask me. I'm
So
the
but
most solid person here.
Let's see what this group, and Barbara hasn't had a chance to speak. So after Barbara speaks, let's be thinking about, does the current library provide the library services that we want? I thought at the beginning of the meeting we said no, but we'll circle back to that. Barbara, go ahead.
Okay, to me, and from what I see, the library is a neighborhood and the beginning of a community, and it should embrace that. It is the face of the community. And everybody said here, when they move, that is one of the first places that you go. I did. Pinehurst is a completely different Pinehurst today than it was when I came here 21 years ago. And I embrace that, and I am joyful of that. And unfortunately, the library hasn't been able or permitted to, because of restrictions, to embrace those changes. And I know for a fact that just in the being in volunteering, how frustrating it is to come up with all these wonderful ideas for children programming and for young mothers. And I also want to address the, you have your young adults and your young people, but you have your teenagers. And we need to be able to offer to them the resources that they need today, where they can come to a safe place and have a trained librarian to be able to help them find the resources to complete their studies that they've been assigned. They don't have that right here in Pinehurst right now. I just, my concern right now is I'm one of those readers that come in, and you come in there and you just embrace the young people, the children that come in, and you're also frustrated because you're so limited to what it is that you can do when your mind just keeps going up, oh, I could do this, this, and this. And so I see two things, and I right now I would just love to be able to open a door to a program where we can embrace Alice and the toddlers right now, and to meet that need that I'm hearing around this table.
So,
okay, like right now, because it's going to be years before we open the door to what, and I thought in the meeting that we have here today was to discover what it is that the community thinks and what their need is. And after we go to that, we can, and I value all the information that has been shared here. But when we discover what it is that the community's desire is for our library, then we can move on to a geographical place in the funding.
So what Barbara is saying is, let's not talk about the facility and the geography yet. You want to focus more on what the community wants from the library. So we talked about children's services. Barbara, you talked about services and space for teens. What else, if anything, does this group want from library services?
I've just got two words, support literacy.
Okay.
And that goes across demographics. Because if you're not literate in computer science, you can go get a book or go online and find it. If you're a 4-year-old, you want them to learn it. And that means the wider community as well. Little kids of all colors and heritage and everything else.
Gotcha.
So use those, if you will. That's just what the two are, support literacy. That's what I come down to.
Okay.
For the library.
Caitlin?
So mine is short and completely unrelated to anything else, but I have digital services. So one of the things that I do is I have a Kindle and I have the Overdrive app, and I use my library card like it's going out of style to get digital books on my Kindle. It's wonderful.
So
you're doing a wonderful job with it right now. There's so many books available. I don't think people know that service is there.
Digital titles.
Most of the books I want are always available, and they go on my Kindle. And I mean, I'd like to say that I walk into the library all the time, but there's like this pleasure of you say, "Oh, I want to read this," and then, okay, I'm reading it.
Gotcha.
So I feel like they're already doing that well, and I'd be very sad if it went away.
Okay, gotcha. I wanted to, Emily, and I'm sorry, I cannot see that far. Nancy, you guys have been kind of quiet. What are you guys thinking about?
Well, I share the feeling about the money issue and why go to the end of the race before we build all the steps. I think you're doing a fine job figuring out what the services are that we need and how to go about doing them. I'm not sure that I buy into spreading out other venues. I think it should be in one building. I go up to the little young girls like this as I see them going into the gym or on the street. How wonderful it is to have these young people here, and I think we have to continue building those services Because when we moved here 25 years ago, everybody was as old as I am now. And it's different now. I mean, the whole demographic has changed, and I think it's wonderful for the community to become even more vibrant, so.
Emily, did you have anything that you wanted to add? And if you don't, it's okay. I just want to make sure you get a chance.
No, I just feel like that the library should have its own place. And what it needs can be decided once they find the money and the land to do it. The museum is a big draw to the town. You see signs all over other states heading for Pinehurst. And about the golf capital of the United States and stuff, like on the major highways, that people get off and come here just to see the museum. And that's wonderful, but they would come more if there was more going on there and not with people in the library at the same time. The library needs its own place, in my opinion. And to have the different facilities, little rooms for children's programs and all the electronics that they could use in the library too as part of it, but with a good area for books.
Thank you. So Amy, and then we'll come back. Okay.
Just getting back to very specifically needs and wants. I was at the meeting yesterday and we were walking down, do we want a gift shop? Do we want this? A lot of those ideas, we're a very traditional, practical town. I don't need a gift shop in my library. I don't need, we don't need a coffee shop. We have the roast office now. I think this town wants to see it, like Sarah said, I want to take my kids to a real library. I feel like since we've moved here, I don't take my kids to the when you walk in, it doesn't even feel like a library. I want something where you de-emphasize the technology. You don't walk in and there's computers everywhere. Where my kids get the feeling of walking up and down aisles of books. That children's section,
That's what I'm
tough. It's like
You can't
a
even see everything.
It's not a real library. My kids have not experienced that, and it's sad. I mean, I suppose I could pay $60 and take them down to the Southern Pines Library, but you know, I
And then
would
there's
like
the computers right in the middle.
Yeah.
And that's all they want to do. And they're geared for kids that got kids games on them.
Right, that's just not what, that's not what I want. I want them to get the experience of pulling a book off the shelf and researching something and talking to a librarian. I grew up with that, and I think we have, at least if you talk about the demographics of people who live in Pinehurst, all of our kids have the devices. They all know technology. And we're all resorting to, when our kids get research projects, going online and pulling up silly stuff because we don't have a library we can go and research stuff. And unfortunately, they're actually not even doing that much in the schools with it. So I would really like to stick with the basics, expand the children's programs, but let's think about a real practical library.
Well, we can do that, okay, by addressing other parts. There are 4 things I've heard today so far. We want library services for the adults. We want children's services and programs. We want to sustain the archives and the Welcome Center. And we need information services. Those 4 basic things. And if we work it, each one can support the other, especially the archives and the Welcome Center. That could be, dare I say it, a money-making proposition in supporting the library.
Gotcha. That's a good summary. Nancy, what did you want
Well,
to say?
something just occurred to me. We're talking about adding all these wonderful services and a youth librarian and a teen librarian and all these. It's going to cost money. When I was on the board, that was a real concern because it is privately endowed. And the endowment ain't going to last forever. And that's just the way it is. I worked on several fundraising groups, Given on the Green. I don't know if you remember that, a couple of years, where we put tents up on the green and behind the library all over, and it was a fantastic event. And another time we did, 2 years, I did the Pinehurst Promenade, where we promenaded the village and went into people's homes. Yes, it raised money, but not nearly enough to provide the services that we're talking about.
But I think you're looking at a different demographics today of who is coming to Pinehurst. The village has grown, and we're getting more people who are retiring from the Army, and they've only had 20 years in the Army, so they're a lot younger than me, okay? So if you ask them, well, maybe, you know, if your taxes go up 5 cents or 10 cents to support a library, I think you're gonna find out they would support it.
Okay.
Now, the resident who's been here 30 years or 40 years say, I don't need a library, it's fine. I don't use it.
Well, Nancy's right. I mean, every single service is going to have a associated expense, facilities, staff, overhead, and so forth. And each one of those services has to be evaluated in terms of its benefit versus the expense. If I could, you asked what we're voting on. I loved your structured approach, being an IT structured kind of guy. I love the approach where you had 18 different things split in 5 different categories and we could vote on those. I really like that approach. Of those, I have 8 or 9 that I really think are important. I'm going to throw those out. Under the gathering spaces, I love the individual working spaces. I love the connected conference group thing. I think I mentioned that before. Under the education.
Do you mean electronically connected?
Yeah, well, where groups could come in and
Okay,
use
so
it as
small
a
areas.
facility for either meeting themselves or connected services. Under educational services, you have a book and magazine collection. I assume that's kind of the normal rental, to tell you the truth, pretty much. And then I love the digital services, e-books and so forth. Under the programs, I love the adult programs and classes. I love the book club, the discussion groups, and children's programs, and the teen programs under the services. And I love the art, music, performance, and those type of activities. So those are the 9 or so that I would vote for, if I had, being one of 17,000 people voting for.
What, that's a really nice list. So of Jack's list, what do others think? Do we
I
also?
agree with his whole list.
And also, there was one
Should we
piece.
caucus and all run over there?
Jack, watch out.
Second motion.
So, one thing though I wanted to dig deeper on, what Jack said at the end, which is some sort of a performance space or arts and cultural, and I'm not talking about a big, auditorium, but some sort of maybe with stair steps or some sort of small intimate performance space, guitar player or something like that. What do we think about that?
I think as long as it's a flex space, great.
Let me introduce this question to the group. Since the enhancement of the Owens Auditorium, how many people have gone to see something, some performance there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, we did
It's there.
We
It's
did
there.
a cultural study. This is like 2013, I think. We had a consultant come in and study all the cultural spaces that were available in Pinehurst. That report's available, obviously. But it was focused on larger scale activities. And I think what we're talking about here, I think what Debbie's talking about is small scale
Something real
cultural
intimate.
type of events.
10 people, 12 people,
Where kids
15.
can give a little play.
Yeah, the large scale stuff didn't go anywhere. I mean, that was kind of rejected by the community, but there are other venues in the community that can handle large scale, and we don't need to get into that.
Right.
So what does the group think about that sort of, I'm calling it tiny, but that's not quite right.
Spaces.
I would say the same
Yeah.
thing, as long as it's a space that can also be used for other.
Again, you're going to be duplicating space that is already existing in the community, such as the new community center. They do have smaller areas in the building that you can do something like that. I think it's very important that if we're going to, I don't want to say push this on the community, an expanded library system, but we have to be cognizant of what's available in the community and how we can collaborate with the existing structures, financially, socially.
Got it. So we're getting a little close on time. Ron, haven't heard from you. Do you have any?
Well, you heard from me only to say you were so far off subject, I'm beginning to get a little bit bored by it. I mean, you're beginning to get back to it now, and that's the point of it. Ultimately, all this comes down to cost. But before you get to that point, we need to discuss what the services ought to be and what people think they might want. And there's a difference between want and need. And I'm not sure quite how you're going to assess that. I agree with them. And one of the things that happens, I think, everybody agrees with all this stuff is really good. Yeah, let's do it. But of course you can't do it. But the small artistic entertainment are very appealing. 10 or 12 people sitting around listening to guitar or in a very interesting discussion on an issue of some importance. Great, I'm for that. I think it's a great idea if you can afford it. If it fits into the overall program. But I think I buy all the points. I'm for those. I'll vote for those. And I share your view. I think that I've been involved in some considerations here, in which whether or not taxes are going to be raised, where it's a very, very important issue. And that's a very, very tender question here. Although I think, I share your view, I think in general, if the library comes up with a plan that seems to be acceptable, desirable, not absolutely ridiculous in what is. I think the community support that. I think we'll get it, but I think we really need to understand what you think the community wants, and I'm not so sure I'd even include the needs. You can't. But let me. That's so subjective. But what the community wants, then. You'll present a finding on that. You'll tell us what the community wants, right? Then that, I'm not. Are you going to give us a recommendation on what you think the community should do?
We will include several recommendations.
Okay, but one. Then that goes to the council, and that's where those decisions get to be made. Having taken all that time, sorry.
That's the whole point.
But I'm taking all the time to saying all that. Yeah, I think we're getting back to where you want to be, and I endorse those ideas as things that we ought to be concentrating on is what the needs, what the wants are. Whether they're the needs or not is a different.
Is there anything before? 1 second.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you haven't heard that you personally think the community wants that you haven't heard? Are we capturing all of it? And that goes out to the whole group, by the way.
What I was thinking is we keep saying a space for a guitar player, a space for a children's library, a space for computers. We haven't really talked about multi-use space at all.
Oh, that's a great point, and that is.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Multi-use.
That we've talked about specific spaces for individual things, guitar players or books or whatever.
So,
what about multi-use space in a facility that we're all
like the
comfortable with?
community building already. I just was there this morning. They had, when you walked in, a desk to tell you where things are, but there's a little room to the right that opens to the outside. They had a children's program going on there with exercises outside. The next room had people on the floor, adults, doing exercise. A huge room with 4 people and an instructor doing exercises.
I'm with her.
On the
Whoever said it. When I go to a library, I want to go to a library.
You want a traditional, what we call
I
a
want the
traditional
feeling of a
library.
The
library.
post office is a good example.
That's a really good point.
There were books around too much.
That's a
So,
really good point.
What's
The
the,
sense of place of a library.
so a library as a
That's gonna
sense
go
of
forward.
place.
Yeah.
A library as what Amy said a few minutes ago, which is what we consider to be a fairly traditional library. Amy said, don't jump ahead to a technology center with walls of touch screens and it's made of stainless steel. Amy said, let's have a traditional library. Flexible space is really is the standard, so understood on that. Let's have a traditional library with flexible spaces that offers room for collaboration, children's programs, teen programs, and it gives us kind of a central gathering point. But don't duplicate efforts. Don't duplicate efforts that are already being undertaken at the community center. Go ahead.
I just keep thinking now that she was talking about moving the Welcome Center there, and then I think about the community center, and I don't know if there would be space, but to have that traditional type library, I feel like, gosh, if you moved the physical library, the books and all of those things, to the community center, you would have so many more people using the library that don't currently use the library. There's a lot of people that don't go, I'm going to go to the library. But there's so many people in Pinehurst that have their kids in basketball, that do all of those types of activities, that if the library is right there in that building, they'll be like, oh, well, let's just go get a book too while we're here. They will use it. Like I feel like we'd all use it more. My hometown, where I grew up in Illinois, they built a big community center. It's got a gym, it's got meeting space, it's got all that stuff, and the library's in it, and it just makes it so much more like it's like we talk about multi-use, it's multi-use.
So what does this group think about having the library at the community center? What do we think about? No, no one does that.
I just don't think that you can fit it in the current building. Like, it would have been a wonderful idea if before they built the community center, they had planned it out. And I feel like that's like the Pinehurst always spends so much time thinking and thinking and thinking that like you miss opportunities. Like they built this really nice community center, and it would have been nice to have the library incorporated into it. But at this point, I think it's too late. The only way they'd be able to do it is they took away the park. You know, like they'd have to build into the fields, and they're not going to build into the fields.
And there's not much parking.
Got it.
Yeah. So it looks like Jerry's going to have the last word. And before you have the last word, I want to say, again, as we leave today, and you know, your friends and family and neighbors might say, well, what the heck's going on? And what did you talk about? And what is one message to share might be that we are trying to think about all the possibilities. We're trying to think about what the community wants. We're trying to, you know, everything is on the table. And if folks haven't taken that online survey, you know, certainly let's encourage them to do so. And the time that you're willing to give us, and the passion and the thoughtfulness, you know, we notice that and we appreciate it.
Could you clarify, is the survey online the one we took to apply for a spot, or is this a different survey? Okay, good. I just want to make sure.
Engage.vopnc.org/library. Jerry, you're famously doing the last word.
I don't think it means that the community center cannot be an arm of the library. I think that the central library could be in a totally different location, and there could be various satellite. We're going to staff a library regardless, so staffing could be in various places. There'll be a lot of places that don't even need a person, if you will. As we move along, you know this yourselves, when you go through the grocery store line, you go over to the self-check. You can check out your own books or whatever materials you need. So we could have an arm in the community center. We could have another arm in another place. It could be 3 or 4 pods where we could do things like that. My last comment is this. Please talk about this issue of the role of the Pinehurst Corporation and our new library in this town. Do not please give away our beautiful Given Memorial Building without the partnership of the Pinehurst Corporation in building the new library. And I'm going to bring up one more little thing that's going to make people's fannies jump around. We are in this county and in this town building hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes for all the new people who are moving in and their children. We are the people who are doing that. We are the military. We are the government. We are the state of North Carolina and the county of Moore County. We have the largest virtual reality contemporary models in the world in our backyard at Fort Bragg. We also have the youngest Major General Commander in charge of Special Ops that's ever been named in the Army. And he is a progressive, open-minded father of 3 wonderful children who loves all of what we're talking about. There are people out there that we have got to reach out to, like Mr. Dedman, and get him involved in what we're trying to do. Because if we don't, our efforts and our conversations will simply go down the drain. They are our partners, whether they know it or not.
Well, thanks again, everybody. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all. Nice to meet you. Go get it. Thanks, Ellen. You're welcome.